So we start civics, July 2018. So tonight, we'll do the roll call first, and then we have two items on the agenda. And before we go into roll call, I want to let people know the 1st of July, the new state law went into effect, so you can make public comments at any public venue in South Dakota. So we will do that at 8 p.m. If these first two discussions go longer than that, the 8 p.m. will roll forward like the others. But when we get to that point, we have a sign-up sheet for you to sign up, and you can, whatever topic of relevance that you want to bring up. So, except what's on the agenda, right? It's some other topic. And we'll clarify that again as we get to that, but just to let everybody know that we do have that. So with 7 o'clock being here, Pat, can we have a roll call of all our smiling faces?
Okay, go ahead and turn on your mics. Paul Kretzinger,
Here.
Jeff Goodall,
Here.
Butch Becker,
Here.
Don Kettering,
Here.
Mary Koenig,
Here. Deborah
Boltonstead,
Here.
Zane Williams, Dan Guthmiller, Michael Welch,
Yes.
quorum present.
Check my magic phone. So we have, the first agenda item will be at 7:05, so we have 3 minutes until that item. If you come up tonight to speak, so what we want you to do is tell us your name, address, and your proximity to whatever the applicant, and we do that not just on what's on the agenda tonight, but decided consistency, we do it on all, whatever issue. Someone wants to build a garage or whatever else. So your name, your address, your proximity to where the issue at hand is, and then, you know, when we go into this, we're going to talk about if you're a proponent or for, come talk. If you're an opponent, come talk. And then what we'll do on this tonight is we'll have 30 minutes for proponents, 30 minutes for opponents, unless we don't use the whole time. And then the applicant would be able to have a 10-minute rebuttal period that would allow for clarification or some point. So looking at that magic number, we should be out of here before 10:30.
Do they have time when, just to come up, what was it, 3 minutes?
To present their topic.
But for a total of 30.
Right, so each person, if we had 30 minutes, we'll divide it by the number of people that want to be a proponent or opponent, and then, but it's 3 minutes per person.
Okay.
Talk too fast. You talk too fast.
Pat, is that clear?
What's clear?
Is that instructions clear that was just given?
Yes. Yep.
So each proponent has a total of 3 minutes.
Each person.
Well, I
Not
think
really.
we're saying 30 minutes for opponents and 30 minutes for proponents. When he asked for proponents, the way he's done it in the past is how many? Well, there's 10. Okay, that's 3 minutes.
If there's 5, they get to use the 30 minutes.
They get to use 30 minutes. 30 minutes.
Good
2
point.
minutes is for the rebuttal at the end, at
10.
the comments afterwards.
10
10
minutes.
minutes.
That's 10.
10-minute
Okay.
rebuttal.
We hear from the applicant.
You didn't hear what I said, Deb.
It's not at the end, Don.
It's for the open comment, public comment, that's 3 minutes. That's what
Yes,
we're doing
yes.
now. That's what we're doing in the commission.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so I don't think that was what was conveyed.
Okay.
So we'll restate that there's 30 minutes for proponents or 30 minutes for opponents. If we have 10 proponents, then that would be 3 minutes. If we have 6 opponents, 30 divided by 6, we're gonna have like 5.
Okay.
So then at the very end of tonight, we're going to do public comment, and that's what Mr. Kettering was talking about, that each person would get 3 minutes of their public comment, and then we have to sign in for that.
They're
So-
two separate
actions or entities?
Yes.
Okay.
Where's the sign-in sheet?
Lean back on chair.
In the back.
Okay, my magic phone now has 7:05. The first applicant tonight is Carl Schenk. Applicant is requesting the modification of a conditional use permit number 3138, Mission Hill site to be modified from a Class D confined animal feeding operation to a Class E confined animal feeding operation. Applicant requests to decrease to one 2,400 head pork finisher swine over 55 pounds, 960 animal units, Class E finishing barn in an agriculture district in Yankton County. Said property is legally described as east 1/2, southwest 1/4, southeast 1/4, section 26, township 94 north, range 55 west, hereinafter referred to as Mission Hill North Township, County of Yankton, State of South Dakota. The 911 address is to be announced 308th Street, Mission Hill, South Dakota. Mr. Schenk or representative, would you come forward to present this project?
Mr. Chairman and the board, my name is Mike Stevens. My law office is on corner 4th and Douglas. I'm representing Mr. Schenk. I'll be very brief in this, inasmuch as you've heard testimony before when you initially approved the conditional use permit number 3138, which provided for two 2,400 head finishing barns. This is somewhat of an unusual request, and that is not requesting that Mr. Schenk be allowed to do more. What he's actually doing is asking permission to modify his request to do less, which would be to reduce the number of finishing barns to one. This, if approved, would change that classification, as the chairman noted, from a Class D confined animal operation to Class E. Exhibit A, which is a part of your packet, would show the modified site. This would be eliminating the northern barn in the previous application, and if approved, then the Class E performance standards would apply. The request also includes the planting of 235 trees of different varieties in 4 parallel rows with the purpose of improving air quality by reducing and intercepting airborne particulate matter, chemical and odors. The trees would take up about 0.62 acres of land. And the plan would be that these trees would be planted in 2019. So this is a request to downsize. I believe that you have been previously provided copies from the original application that was provided by Mr. Schenk on the odor footprint tool, and I think this one was provided to you tonight. If you compare that one to the packet for this modification, you'll see that the odor footprint map is significantly smaller than it was when the application was first submitted as well as approved. So this new mapping indicates a significant smaller area impacted by the potential odor due to the location of only having one 24-head finished barn. The proper notice, I think, was provided to everybody. Find it? Yep. Okay. And
I'm sorry.
that's right. And so at Mr. Schenk's request, we'd ask that his original application be modified to reduce it down to one, removing that northern one that was in the original application and allowing him to put in the trees.
Thank you, Pat, for clarification for the people in the audience. When this prior application was put in and the application consisted of 2 barns, that application, it went from the planning commission to the county commission, and then the county commission, did they approve or disapprove that for the 2 barns?
Okay, to qualify just a little bit, the county commission is actually the Board of Adjustment, and yes, they did approve it for the 2 barns, as it was findings of fact approved by the planning commission with no changes.
Okay, so I wanted that clarification for people in the audience so that they understand we are taking an approved action to reduce the total number of hog confinement barns at this particular application.
Yes. Plus, he has introduced tree planting on his how would I say? He has voluntarily initiated the tree planting around the barn. So he has the 4 rows of trees in which you see the NRCS is speccing them out, which is Natural Conservation Resource Services. They've come up with the varieties that are appropriate for putting in there, which are good varieties. But if you want to read them, they're right there. But they're Meyer spruce and I do believe I think the hardwood was even an oak. But they're going to put in those 4 rows of trees. And you can see that on your site plan too, where those trees are.
Thank you, Pat. Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to be a proponent for this project? Do we have anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this project? Kind of like an auction, we'll do it 3 times and we'll sell it. Do we have anyone in the audience who would want to be a proponent of this project?
Opponent.
No, I said proponent twice, and then I did it 3 times, so we have no one to speak as proponents. Do we have anyone that would like to speak as an opponent to this project? Yes, ma'am, if you can come forward, state your name. Well, first of all, how many opponents do we want? We have 2, so that 3, we have 3 opponents. That's what I see is 3 right now. So that means we could have up to 10 minutes each opponent. So if you can state your name, address, and your proximity to the location of this project.
All right, my name is Margaret Healy, and I currently live at 2014 Ross Street in Yankton. And I will soon be moving to 30848 444th Avenue, Mission Hill, South Dakota, which is approximately 2/3 of a mile from Carl and Nancy's proposed CAFO site. And I just want to say that I don't believe that any of you sitting up here have any idea what impact that this has had on my family for the past year plus. Your decisions surrounding the enforcement of the ordinances with animal feeding operations has really impacted my family. My husband and I will be moving to my daughter and her family's acreage on 444th Avenue. Amy, my daughter, and her family have been living there for several years and enjoying the beautiful country life with their 3 children. The decisions of this committee, the current county commissioners, and the owners of the proposed site to not enforce the ordinances have been the impetus for my daughter and her family to move back into Yankton, into the city. So my daughter Amy grew up spending many, many days on the farm with her grandparents in Yankton County, and she knows the joy of the country life for children. She wanted her 3 children to have a similar experience with country life. This came to a screeching halt a little over a year ago when all of this started, with the decisions that were made by the people that are in charge of this county. Amy, Travis, and their 3 children have experienced tremendous stress over the decisions of the people in charge of our county. They have questioned over and over and over again why one person's right to make money has taken precedence over their families and their neighbors' right to have clean air and clean water. This questioning has basically been met with what seems to be deaf ears, either that or a lack of empathy. I'm not sure which one. The ordinances written by our previous commissioners and the intent of these ordinances have not been followed, which has impacted this family greatly. The ordinances that were written by our previous commissioners that address quality of life for neighbors has been ignored over and over by the people currently acting in authority for Yankton County. It is time this committee follows the written comprehensive plan ordinances surrounding these animal feeding operations. So I am asking that either this application be denied or that conditions are imposed for the assurance of the use of best management practices, which it also states in the comprehensive plan, which has been ignored over and over and over, such as biofilters, trees, shrubs, pit additives, feed additives, all of these to this current proposed feeding operation. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next.
My name is David Healy. I currently live at 2014 Ross Street here in Yankton, South Dakota, and also plan on moving out into the country in close proximity to the proposed hog barn. I would like to take a few minutes and address the odor footprint that Carl submitted. On paper, it doesn't look very imposing. But I think we have to take into consideration that this graph is illustrating an annoyance factor of 3 on a level of 1 to 5. At a level 3 is the point when you are going to get up off the deck and go in the house. The wife's going to come in from the flower garden and be quite upset with you, or with the neighbor anyway, on account of he's stinking up the neighborhood. Kids are going to quit playing. Gardening's over for the day. That's the real effect of an annoyance factor. And you also have to take into account this is a level 3. We didn't go from 0 to 3 in a matter of a minute. You've been at a level 1, which is a point where you're already smelling the odors, and you've probably been at that point ever since the time the wind changed that day. You're going to progress to a level 2, which a level 2 is a point where some people are annoyed by it and some people are not. And so you're going to go through that stage of annoyance. And then finally, stage 3 is what this graph is based on, and this is the point where everyone is considering the odors to be offensive. And so just wanted to state that. Now, when I looked at this graph, also I noticed that we're out anywhere from 4,800 feet to about 2,800 feet. You draw a circle around this barn, and we're going to impact 17 different residences and one business. And I drew a circle at about 4,000 feet. And that's, again, at a level 3. So that means level 2, you're probably going out a mile. Level 1, you're probably going out a mile and a quarter. And affecting people. People are going to smell this barn a mile and a quarter away. Mission Hill is a mile and a quarter away, so they're going to smell this barn. It won't be at an annoyance level, but they will smell this barn. Also, I'd like to point out that level 3 annoyance factor on this graph does not include the odors from the dead animals that are, of course, going to be piled up by the barn. It does not include the time period when the pits are being pumped, and it does not in factor into the time that both of those odors are going to be in the air. I think in the long run here, guys, by not putting odor controls on these barns is going to be a little bit short-sighted. I think we're all in this together. I farm. We may get a few barns up now, but that's, like I say, when we're doing something like this so irresponsibly, it's not gonna last. It's no wonder, people are gonna start hating farmers. I mean, why wouldn't you? You're stinking up my house, you're stinking up my property, you're devaluing my property, you're reducing my quality of life. We're not gonna be able to sustain that. So why are we doing this? Particularly when there's so many technologies available now to avoid it. If you look at the odor footprint tool again, you go down about 2/3 of the way on the sheet. We have odor control technology. And it's filled in with no odor control. 0. But yet I've heard members on this committee, I've heard talk on the street, of course, but I've also read articles about how all these new barns have all this new modern technology to avoid any kind of environmental issues, and they could have, but they don't have. Nobody's imposing it, so they're not putting it on there, and they're not spending the money. These barns are the same design that was used 40 years ago. They've created a reputation for themselves from North Carolina to Iowa. You know. So I guess I'd have to say we would like to really see some odor control put on this barn. That's all we're asking. Take that footprint, reduce it down so it doesn't impact 17 residences around it. Just finish up here a little bit. In our community, or where I currently farm right now, we've had a number of retired home buyers come in from out of state, East Coast, Kansas, Iowa, and they're coming here because of our quality of life. Our air is not contaminated. Our water isn't contaminated. They're coming here and buying homes that are coming up for sale in the country. They're maintaining our real estate values. They're not destroying our roads. They're not bringing crime with them. They're hiring contractors to remodel their homes, build shops, build garages. They're coming to town to buy their supplies, their groceries, medical needs. There's an industry that we're going to destroy. They wouldn't come here to live beside a hog barn. And so I don't know if we're taking that into account when we think about the economic benefits of these barns. And like I say, it can be avoided. We can have the best of both worlds. We can have barns that don't stink, and we can have people that want to live here. So just hopefully we can get that message across. Yeah, I guess all I can say is let's not screw it up for everybody here, guys. I think we're being just a little short-sighted, and we're not putting any kind of odor controls on these barns. I've been around barns. We've got one north of my farm place. It's an enclosed barn, no biofilters, managed very well. I go by there once a month, and I have yet to smell that barn. So it can be done. You know, there's no doubt it can be done, and economically. In fact, down the road from that very same barn, there's a brand new house that was just built. So why are we doing what we're doing? I don't understand it. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. The last person for the opponent.
My name is Paige Herrick. I live at I don't even know where I live. 44628 308th Street, Mission Hill. It's about a mile from this proposed barn, about a quarter mile from the downtown Mission Hill metropolitan area. And I'm not going to get up here and talk about everything that's been said over and over and over again for the last year. the health issues, the environmental issues, because you people are sick of hearing it, and you don't want to hear any more of it. But I do want to talk a little bit about the environment and farming. Nowadays, environmentalism is associated with the radical left, the tree huggers, the animal rights activists, the people that live in La La Land, and they just drive me up the wall. I'm a right-wing conservative, and I think I can stand up here and talk about environmentalism with a little bit of common sense and rationale. Now, I think there's people in this room that are my age, maybe not many, but can remember the 1960s, before environmentalism was a household word. People across the United States, near large cities, industrial areas, were being sickened and killed by industrial pollutants that had been indiscriminately dumped on the land and in water sources by industry. These are chemicals like 1,1,1-trichloroethane, trichloroethylene, methylene chloride, methyl ethyl ketone. In industrial areas, the air was so filthy you couldn't breathe it because of vapors from industrial chemicals and from particulate matter. I think you'll also remember that Lake Erie was a dead lake. No plant life, no animal life. I'm sure you remember when the Ohio River caught fire and burned for 4 or 5 days because of industrial pollutants. It was time for a change. And while we think of environmentalism today as the radical left, it was a very conservative President, Richard Nixon, that used an executive order to create the Environmental Protection Agency. And I don't have to tell you how much cleaner our land, our air, and our water are since that time. Now also, if we go back to the 1960s and look at farming, it was the late 1960s, probably mid-1960s, when combines started replacing corn pickers, when grain dryers started replacing corn cribs, and when millions, if not billions, of gallons of herbicide started replacing the cultivator. But at the time the Environmental Protection Act was established to put in place, farming wasn't a polluter like industry was. Matter of fact, at that time, we hadn't even heard the term corporate farming. Although I think many people knew it was coming. My dad told me from the time I was 8 years old, back in 1956, that the day of the small-time farmer is over. If you can't go in big, get out. And now we're seeing the impact of that. And we talk about the environment. Okay, what's the environment? That's our land, that's our air, and that's our water. Everything we have comes from our environment, whether it's our food, building materials for our houses, raw materials for our automobiles, our recreational vehicles. We need clean air and clean water for so many of our recreational activities. The environment's all we've got. And without the environment, there's not going to be us. And I'm not talking the radical left environment. I'm talking common sense environmentalism. Now, it's obvious that our quality of life depends on the environment, because that's all we have. And I hear over and over again that, well, we're going to take quality of life out of the comprehensive plan because it can't be defined. Well, I'll tell you what, you know when you've got quality of life. And when you lose it, you will know it. But then it's going to be too late. So if we want to have anything for ourselves, we've got to do some common sense environmentalism. I don't mean radical left environmentalism. I mean doing the basic things to protect our soil and our water and our air, to protect the most important thing we have, which is our health. This is just something for everybody to think about. I have no high and mighty expectations that anything I have said is going to stop the approval of this CAFO without conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very
One
much.
question. What, I understand that the city of, dumped their sewage into the water stream a week or so.
Yes, that's correct.
3 or 4 weeks.
I don't know all the details on it, but since Mission Hill, as most cities with sewage systems or sewage lagoons, or any industry that has the ability through intentions or accidents to pollute, has an NPDES permit. That's a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. And maybe that violated their permit. I don't know. But we have to remember, it was under unusual conditions.
The point I want to get at is, I haven't seen a word in the paper that challenged the environmental damage done by that act.
But we don't know.
That's all I want to.
We don't know that there has been. But we do know that human waste is only about 1/8 to 1/10 as hazardous as hog waste.
I would challenge that, but.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So Pat, before I bring it back to the board for discussion, so I just want a rebuttal. Mr. Stevens, do you have a rebuttal on any?
I think you ought to give them the full 30 minutes in case somebody else wants to talk.
I'm fine with that too. So actually, I can make the point that I wanted to make. So right now, I want to clarify for everybody here and us on the board, commission, that right now, we actually have an approved permit for 2 hog barns on this particular site. And right now, what is up before us is to change the conditions of the approved site that had 2 barns, to reduce it basically to 1, reducing the total animal population by half of what we had with 2. So here's my question. So if you look at this and say, if there was an approval of this presentation, that, actually what I want to say, if you have a disapproval of this, that it's not approved, then he still has authorization to build 2 barns. You know what I mean? If this goes to, and so if it's approved,
Let's back up and say, under the context of, the request was brought to the office. The request is I want to reduce it from 2 barns to 1 barn. Can I just do it? I look it up. It's not an administrative process. I can't do it administratively. So we have to do it board-wise. The existing permit exists. The existing permit as out there that we have approval through the Board of Adjustment on 2 barns exists today. You're correct in that this being an application to say, can I modify or change this to 1 barn? I will have to say you're right on the context of saying, is there 2 barns that exist today that I could write a building permit for? Yes. Once they meet conditions on those 2 barns, we could write a building permit. But I can't administratively all of a sudden say, when he wants to come back in and say, I just want to build 1 barn now. Then I said, that puts you in a different class, and I can't administratively do that. I can't just write you a building permit for 1. We got permission out there to build 2. We have to go back and go through the process of the hearings to allow you to go back to a different classification, even though it's a reduction. So administratively, it cannot be done. So, but you're correct on your last analysis that there is an existing CUP permit for 2 barns at each location.
okay, being a devil's advocate, what if this does not get approved and they decide to build one of the 2 barns? Do they have a period of time 1 year, 2 years, something, that they could build an additional second barn that's still approved. Or, because right now it's approved for 2, so if they come in and they build 1, and
I
it's
just
underneath the
assumed,
permit of 2, do they have to either start construction or permit the second building within a year or 6 months or something? Or is it something that they could say, in 5 years, I'm gonna build my second barn?
no. Let's go no to almost everything you said there. Either we're going to build 2 barns or we're going to build 1 barn. Now, I can't, all of a sudden, we're sitting there and I just issue 1 permit for 1 barn and we never come back and build the second barn. That isn't what we did here. We have a bunch of fields tied up in those 2 barns. We have a lot of setback tied up in those 2 barns. We have notification periods tied up in those 2 barns. And we have manure management plans tied up in those 2 barns. And all of a sudden, we don't build the other barn. Where do those fields go, and how do I manage that, and how do I make sure we're doing rotation? How do we make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do to monitor our conditions? And so either we build 2 barns or we build 1 barn, but I can't go in there saying, well, I'm going to build 1 in 5 years or 2 years or 6 months, I'm going to build the other one. I can't do it that way. Either we build them both or we don't. And he came in later and said, I'm just going to build 1 at each location. And there's some reasons for that in the industry. The industry wants to reduce and is learning how to reduce some of the wear and tear that would be out on county roads. If we can put the barns where the fields are, we aren't having to haul the manure. We don't have to haul it. Second of all, the more that we also want to try and have them separated for biosecurity. That's also another impact they're talking about. And thirdly is that it does spread out on the load and unload for the facilities. So there's 3 different impacts that the industry itself is looking at, and they like to see single barns. And that's what you're seeing out in the country. When you go out there, you very seldom see doubles up. So that's what they're asking for also. But I could not have, he proposed that proposal about building the second barn 2 years from now, and I can't deal with that because I can't monitor it. It's too hard. I can monitor it, give me 1 barn, 1 field, or the fields that go with it, but no assumptions. So that's why we're going through the process. If you take a look at the application, the fields are very well picked out for this one. We pulled fields out that were added to this for the second barn. They're not in there now. And so we know what fields we have to go to, and we know the rotation on those fields. And that will also come up on the next one too. So I have the notifications all set up for those fields. So when the time comes and we have to do that job, it's clean. So that's why we're here.
Thank you for the clarification. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood where we're sitting at. Is there any other opponents? Return it to the commission. Any further comments or questions? Or Mr. Stevens, rebuttal if you had to any of the opponents?
You know, Mr. Chairman, I think for the discussion and the questions that you brought up, you would have pre-answered the material that I would have presented.
Thank you. Returning it back to the commission for further discussion.
In the management of these barns, if they want to build, if they would build 2 barns and they only want to put 1,000 head in each, manure management, as far as that, the identified fields, isn't going to change. But they're going to be putting out less than half of the animal, waste than they would be. So whether they build 1 barn now and never build a second barn, or whether they build 2 barns and only occupy 1, depending on what the availability is. Heard something today about the availability of feeder cattle coming up. Going to be short until for the next couple, 3 months. If they can't find the animals to put in the units, that could reduce the amount of waste that comes out or the amount of buildings in need. So if they're permitted for 2, and they can fill both, or they can fill 1, or they decide that they want to go with 1 and not with the other later on, because it's an economic decision for them. I don't see how we can restrict that. I mean, we can restrict the construction, we have a deadline, but as far as them deciding to change their mind.
But I don't think that even applies here, because he's only applying for 1.
Well, I understand that. I understand that.
It's a what-if scenario, right?
The typical integration system involves so many pigs coming out of the south unit.
Isoweeds and
So many
everything else.
pigs coming out of isoweed unit, so many pigs going in. It's unlikely that a 2,400 head unit would be populated very much of the time with 1,000 head. They'll pretty much fill it up.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but if you have 2 units, 2 barns, and you only, this gentleman wants to go to a 1 barn, 2,400 head. Or 2,400 head. So, if you had 2 barns, you only using 1 for 2,400 head, or you were permitted for 2, you built the first one, put them in, and decided that you were economically, it wasn't feasible or intelligent to go ahead with the second barn. That's a management decision. Maybe it's your banker's decision.
If you had 2 barns and only one of them full, it would be your banker's decision.
Yeah. Well, they're supposed to.
You do not build 2 of these
I think they have them
barns.
under contract. I mean, they're under contract with somebody else.
Exactly, he would, he'd have your tail.
But I mean, then you wouldn't be building, there would be no reason to build the other one.
Right.
Once it's built, you better have it. I understand that.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question. Maybe Pat can answer this better. What is the reasoning why he's decreasing this? Now, I had heard that the clay was not deep enough to DENR specifications, or can you fill us in a little bit on that?
I don't have DNR is talking about, they haven't given me anything. They haven't said anything. They did ask about a permit that was talked about earlier there, but it's a discharge permit that if there's possible issues with pollution, could we do, or would you recommend a discharge permit if that ends up being the case down there? What I do know is that with the 2 barns being in there, DENR is saying that they're looking at least until next September or October, this upcoming September, October, before they'll give us the final report. They have done the soil borings. They have done what they would do. They have said would recommend that we can put barns there, but we aren't sure what we can do we don't have a conclusive answer for you regarding aquifer or water problems. So, with that issue being said, that's in the Gayville site. With that one being said, and then also them not being able to get the permitting in there, they'd like to start the barn this fall. Now, what goes back to what Mr. Welsh was saying earlier, and also Mr. Becker, is remember, performance standards change. If you take a look at them, the reason why I can't administratively go from a Class D to a Class E is because their performance standards change. And what are one of them? What is it? One of them is the DNR requirement. So we do not have to have the DNR requirement for our Class C operations. And so then number 2 gets dropped out. So then what we have to do is what we're doing currently with the Cuts barn. And that is that it puts a lot more effort, or I would say pressure on the zoning office, but they have to go out and do the borings. They have to show me where the cement's going to be and what the profile is in the soil, just like we did at the Cuts one. And then we take a look and we look for the clay layer and look for what's going on. And then on the Cuts one, we went ahead and we will help, if it needs amending, we'll amend it if it needs it. But again, that's on our part as a county.
Excuse me, amend, what do you mean by the amendment?
Putting in structural soil
Okay.
over the top of, because they have to do that if they're going to put that kind of cement in there. On the Cuts barn, just the sheer cement load requires structural soil, but that one's up on the bluffs. So when we go into this one, the pressure will be, or I would say the review will be back over, we have to make sure as a county that they build that correctly and that it has the clay layer in there, which we aren't having a problem with that. That's not an issue. The other issue that's going on, and this is purely financial, there's several things happening out there in the pork industry. There's all sorts of dynamics. We can all say what they are, but why bother? Let's just say it's pretty darn dynamic, and the sooner we get the barns built, the sooner we can get pigs in those barns, the sooner we can get those contracts going. And there's pressure on that to get some barns built. And that's an economic factor. But as far as safety and water and any of those types of things, I have discussed with Mr. Shank several times that those sites have to be suitable. They have to be suitable. If they're not just not going to work. I can't let them build there. And we've already turned down some applications for sites that are not suitable. You know, we don't publish those, but we've turned down applicants that have come in and want to build for sites that are not suitable. And if this one isn't suitable, it won't be. And we've also tested the one up at Mission, for the Mission Hill one, is a much better soil profile, but again, it has to be suitable. And that means structural soils have to be in the profile. Is it over an aquifer? Not that DNR is saying, no, it is not over an aquifer. Everything that they're pointing to it is not over one. If it ends up being over one, we'll all recognize that, and that's a different deal altogether. But it's not over an aquifer that I know today. And it's not in the floodplain, but we will have to make sure it has structural soils.
Pat, there's something here on the modification of the CUP 3138. The question was asked, why is he doing this? And I think if you look at the reason for the request, I say see the original application, next line is to compromise with neighbors.
Yep.
And, I think Mr. Shank has gone out and has tried to be a good neighbor with his surrounding residents. And I don't know if any of those people are here, but this has stood out to me.
There is, and I agree, Carl, on that statement, and that there is some trees there, and that isn't something that I requested, or that I felt was mandatory to move forward on this, but he did. But he'd always planned on planting trees, but that I've always felt, on those sides of operations, we're not talking about open lagoons here, we're talking about covered lagoons.
Yeah.
On those kinds of operations, we do consider screening and shades and trees.
Yeah.
But when do we need to do them? If Carl wants to do them, I believe that's a perfectly good thing to do.
But I think it stands out, the wording here.
Yes.
That he wrote,
Yes,
he's
that
making
they're
his
visiting.
neighbors happy.
Yep. But there's been some comments. Regarding that, so, but,
So I have a question. I don't know if it pertains to these two cases, but normally we meet the second Tuesday of the month. And today's like the fourth or fifth Tuesday of the month. So why was there a change in the agenda? I'm assuming we still have the second Tuesday in August.
yep. We'd like to get the buildings started this fall. Gave us 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. That's purely what it is, that I know of. Special meetings, just make clear of this too, I mean, special meetings are listed in the ordinance. They do pay a fee for that. There was a $350 fee for that. You can, and as long as we had a quorum, and when we contacted everybody, they said within 24 hours we had one, we can do a special meeting. So that's what they're for.
So I want to clarify for everybody in the audience, if someone else was in the same condition, whether they're building a building or whatever else, that they would be allowed to, I'm assuming so, but they would be allowed to request a special consideration due to time or whatever, that is an open thing that's readily available to everybody in Yankton County.
This is a month where you have 5 Tuesdays, kind of adds up. Anyway,
I want to make a point that changing from Class D to Class E really changes just one thing.
yep,
And that is the waste management system plan and the certificate from the DENR.
yep,
They still have to get a certificate for the stormwater permit for construction activities from DENR.
yep,
Their distance from Class 1 municipality residential areas stays the same,
yep,
as well as the confinement facilities to be located at no more than half a mile from a class 2 or 3 incorporated municipality, church, established R2 or R3 residential area. Those numbers stay the same. So seriously, it's paragraph 1 of section 519 that is the only thing that's changing from this previous application. And what you've mentioned is the addition of the trees, which is an option here under the screening or buffering to
Shall be
plant trees
considered.
or shrubs to control wind movement and dispersion of odors.
Yep. So he voluntarily put that in there, and then you go down farther, and this is why it's in front of you in terms of, if you didn't want to build the second barn, who cares? But I have to watch so carefully because it's an inventory with those fields. Because we want such a detailed condition on those fields and who's applying and what's the rotation. I have to have a very clear manure management plan. I can't have an assumption that these barns are going to go to that field. I can't do it.
Use of those fields is a valuable asset too.
Yes, exactly.
And that's a marketable item.
So,
So I have a question.
Pat, as I understand our discussion tonight, we're discussing whether you build 1 unit or 2 units. None of the rest is applicable.
true.
Okay, so we're deciding on 1 level, 1 unit or 2.
Or a Class D or a Class E.
Okay.
That's even better. Just
So, he's putting in trees, he's going down in level, he's made some things to hopefully rectify or make it more pleasant in the community. But I don't see a lot of discussion anymore. Mr. Chairman, I'd call for the vote.
I just have one more question for Representative
Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Stevens. Do you know, or has it been discussed, whether there would be any pit additives, or is he going to monitor the food so, changes the odor?
I have not discussed that with him, Commissioner, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
No further discussion, so we'll go to roll call vote. Pat, so, and to clarify, if you approve this,
You need a motion.
right, if we have a motion that would approve this, then if you voted for it, it will allow 1 barn. If you disapprove it, it will allow 2 barns.
I'd rather you say it's a Class E or it's a Class D. 1 barn's a Class E, it's a
2 barns is a class.
We're only approving this application,
Yes.
so all we have to say is we approve the application, if that's the case.
I make a motion to approve the application to move from 2 barns to 1 barn, Class D to Class E.
Second.
Discussion. Discussion.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, Pat?
So we're gonna, the conditional use will be reduced to class from a Class D to a Class E for the Mission Hill location.
And, well,
Just a second, I'm ahead of myself.
we should also say that he's adding trees
Yeah, as site plan perspective.
per site plan and performance standards apply.
Kettering,
Yes.
Kretzinger,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Becker,
Yes.
Udall,
Yes.
Koenig,
Yes.
Bodenstedt,
Yes,
Welsh.
Yes.
Motion carries.
That completes the discussion for the 7:05 agenda item. The next item is 7:35. Carl Schenk is requesting the modification of a conditional use permit number 3139, Gayville site, to be modified from a Class D confined animal feeding operation to a Class E confined animal feeding operation. Applicant requests to decrease to 1 2,400 head pork finisher swine over 55 pounds, 960 animal units, Class E finishing barn in the agriculture district in Yankton County. Said property is legally described as southwest 1/4, except east 794.52, west 1,542.30, south 61 or 615.61, and except lots H3, H4, and H5. Section 9, Township 93 North, Range 54 West, and East 794.52, West 1542.30, South 615.61, Southwest 1/4, Section 9, Township 93 North, Range 54 West, hereinafter referred to as Gayville Township, County of Yankton, State of South Dakota. 911 address is 44820 South Dakota Highway 50, Gayville, South Dakota. Mr. Shank, or representative, will you come up and address this project?
Mr. Chairman and the board members, this would be virtually the same request for this application as the previous one, only this is a different location in Gayville. The same type of things are occurring, reducing it down to one finishing barn. Again, my client is added as a part of his application that he would put in 235 different varieties of trees in 4 parallel rows, taking up about 0.62 acres. Trees being planted in 2019. This is another request to downsize previously. Again, you have the amended odor footprint map that was included showing that there's a smaller size that's being affected in this area. And as opposed to going through every line as I did previously, I'll leave it with that.
Sir,
Yes.
do you have any information on, it says electrical cable issue?
Yes, what my understanding is that when the electrical line came through and as they were moving a tree, they discovered this electrical line. And so and that would have run right through the barn that we're taking out. And so as opposed to going through that, then that was another reason, in addition to the previous ones, to eliminate that barn.
Thank you.
So we'll address this in the same format. 30 minutes for proponents, 30 minutes for opponents. We'll divide them by the number of people. Do we have any proponents for this project? Do we have any opponents to this project? Yes, sir. How many opponents? We can divide out the 30 minutes. 2? Is there anyone else? So right now, you could have up to 15 minutes each. If you come forward and take your turn and name, address, and proximity to the location.
Good evening. Phil Taw, 44873 River Rat Road, Gayville, about 2 miles south of the site. I just want to confirm what you had stated earlier, that Carl did reach out. Some folks reached out to him. He reached out to them back in a roundabout way to me and some other folks in an effort to try and find out what some of the issues were. So, and that was not always a pleasant discussion, but at least it was a discussion.
That's always good.
So, and that's was a start. So,
Excuse me, did you say you're 2.5 miles south?
two south,
Two south?
directly south. So, my concern at this particular site, I think when you get the soil borings and that kind of thing, is because it's lower and the aquifer is going to be there, I think you're going to find a different soil type, but I'll let that answer for itself. The other part that I'm concerned about with this site, just to the on the west side of that little depression there was full of water, like a lot of other things were full of water. So what I've stated here in several meetings over the last year is my concern is not generally that the pit's going to massively leak or destroy itself or blow up or something like that. That's not going to happen. Maybe in 15 years the concrete's going to erode, but that's another matter. But when we're putting this material on our fields, there's going to be runoff and erosion. the Mission Hill ditch, and we've had a lot of discussions lately about that ditch and that the drainage board and the ditch committee, or whatever you want to call it. I want this planning commission and the board of adjustment, we need to start paying attention to some of those things in this county. And so when things like Mission Hill happen, that's the first I've heard of it tonight, maybe because it wasn't in the paper. But there's other things out there in Vollen that were flooded that put some pretty bad stuff in that Mission Hill ditch, and it ran right into the Missouri River. Okay, so I think we need to have some consideration of where and know where we're putting the manure on the fields. Protect those fields. If it's so good for the fields, let's do our best to keep it in the fields. And that's ditch management, that's buffers, grass strips, all those things that other counties are trying to deal with along the Big Sioux River, et cetera. So let's not lag behind. Let's stay ahead of the curve and keep our community safe, our farm fields safe, our land, water, and air as clean as we can. And that's up to us right here, right now. And I think we can do it, and we can find a way, all right? As far as smell goes, when they were burning that place down, my wife came home from work and said, well, somebody's burning. Didn't smell bad, but somebody's burning. Nice, good north wind. It smelled just a gentle hint of smoke 2 miles south of there. I'm telling you, you can take your odor footprints, and I don't think it really matters. We're going to smell it. It's just different than other things. It's different than beef and cattle, livestock that I smell at our current house right now from across the river or from in town. It's not always noxious, but it's there, okay? So there's neighbors much closer to this site. I don't think any of them are in the room tonight. Hopefully they were notified. But those are just some of my general concerns. But it was good to have Carl reach out, and we tried to talk about a few things. I'd like this board to recommend pit additives, though, to keep that smell down as low as we can, and then start considering when you start changing that comp plan and moving forward with the new zoning plan, if we ever do that, is to talk about field management and keeping manure and fertilizer in our fields where it belongs and not running off, even on some big events. It seems like every 10 years we have a 100-year event. So good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next opponent.
Well, I've got the same name and address as I had a half hour ago. Paige Herrig, 44628 308th Street, Mission Hill. I probably live 4 or 5 miles from this place. And what I'm about to say now, I'm not speaking as a complete opponent of this. Just as on my last little talk, I hope I gave everybody something to think about. And I want to give you something to think about now. It is certainly no laughing matter, but I do want to treat it in somewhat of a humorous manner. And I mean no disrespect to anybody or the commission, but this CAFO is going to be going along right alongside Highway 50, and we know there's going to be some odor. And visitors coming from the east, that's going to be their first impression of our community. And I don't want us to end up in the position that so many communities with foul odors are in, whether it's from a pulp mill or a rubber mill or the stockyards or a packing plant or a food processing plant. When they have a disagreeable odor, they get a very insulting nickname. And, the first thing that comes to mind when Yankton has a foul odor, it's going to be called Rankton. And I think we deserve better than that. I think that's pretty amateurish. And now here's where the humor comes in, but I still want you to think about the impact this is going to have on visitors. I think it's time for the city and the county to be proactive rather than reactive. It's going to be very difficult for people to poke fun at us if we poke fun at ourselves first. So I think we need to sponsor a contest only open to people outside of Yankton County. And the contest will be to come up with an insulting nickname for Yankton. First prize should be a week's free stay in Yankton. And second prize should be 2 weeks free stay in Yankton. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who is an opponent? Mr. Stevens, do you have any rebuttal comments? Back to the commission, any further discussion?
We're using the same one for both of them, the footprints.
There's
It's in the package.
separate ones each.
I got the revised one right here.
Yes. Any further discussion with Plan Commission? Do we have a motion one way
I'll
or the
make
other?
the motion that we go from Class D to a Class E, and that we accept the one barn
Motion to approve.
And the trees,
and the trees.
as shown on the application.
Yeah, that's showing everything is on the footer footprint here.
I'll second that.
Okay. So we're going to go from a Class D to a Class C with the site plan as presented. That has the trees by Mr. CS. Udall,
Yes.
Becker,
Yes.
Goldenstedt,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Koenig,
Yes.
Kretzinger,
Yes.
Kettering,
Yes.
Welsh.
Yes.
Motion carried.
That brings us to our last agenda item tonight for public comment,
Is there anything, anybody sign up back there?
and I'm not sure if anyone signed up.
All right, go get it.
Do I still have time?
Yep.
Yes, you do. 3 minutes.
Reconsider that?
Yeah.
Louis Johnson, 30441 447th Avenue, Volland, South Dakota. I sat here tonight and I listened to the concerns, and apparently everybody thinks that every hog farmer out there is nothing but a terrible person, because we're just going to pollute everything. I have yet to figure out, when you knife manure in, how more of that is gonna run off than where you broadcast it over the top and don't till it when it rains and the water goes down the side of the field and takes half the field with it. Why you don't think that that nitrogen and phosphate will pollute any more or any less than something that's knifed into the ground and is held by the soil. And it improves the soil tilth and it improves the water quality. And Dave, as far as your comment about the odor, I can't stand spray. So for my quality of life, we have to get rid of herbicides, and everybody has to go back to walking the cornfields and walking the bean fields and cultivating and plowing and disking. And it'll really bring a lot of people back to the farm, because they'll raise half the crops they did before with 4 times the work. Thank you.
Is there any other comments for this evening, public comment period? So one thing I'd like to recognize is that we had people that had discussed with the people that were applicants, and there was discussion, and I think that's, that's like the first time we've done this, that we've actually had people communicate and discuss whatever the issue was, then it wasn't our responsibility to make neighbors' decisions. I'm taking it you'd like to make a public comment? Yes, ma'am. We're open. Come on up and sign your. Okay. 3 minutes.
Amy Washan, 30848 444th Avenue, soon to be 2405 Mulberry Street. Just wondering, you say you take all the land into consideration when you plan these out and let them build them. So I'm just wondering if anyone has gone out to check on Jay Kutz's, that is underwater and he was pumping water out of it. So what?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I did, and
I'm sorry. You know that.
that's right, I can't talk. We can't, any of us can talk.
They can comment to us, but we
You
can't
cannot direct
comment
it to
back.
the commission. You can have a public comment that talks about it. You can talk about what you saw out there, Amy, but do not direct it to the commission. It's a
Okay.
public comment.
Okay,
We're all
That
learning
makes
this.
that clear to an extent?
gotcha,
Yes.
Educate the rest
They're
of
there to listen. They can be influencing them, but they can't comment on it.
gotcha, okay.
So, anyway.
Okay, so do you feel like that's going to affect anything, Jay? With building your, did you have to pump a lot of water out of your pit?
It's not,
That's not what this is for.
Oh,
Basically,
No.
so how you would present this is, I'm aware that,
okay, I'm aware that there's a lot of
rains
water and we can't control the rain and that this could be a huge problem. And I don't
Gladly
feel,
address that problem at the office.
okay,
I have no problem with that. We have
Great.
watched that very, very carefully. But remember, public comment is to come up, and if you want to talk about that, then
Okay.
we're aware, but don't make us answer the question. or
okay,
come back
gotcha.
and report.
like to notify us of the spill from Mission Hill or something like that.
Yep.
But most people in here didn't know about that.
Right, right,
It's an educational thing,
okay,
sharing with everybody, not-
Okay.
not asking certain questions.
okay,
Read
I'm
the
sorry,
lesson decoded.
gotcha. Well, there was a lot of water that was pumped out of the barn, the field, and it is a concern, so.
I think you could, I don't,
Oh, I just wanted to add something to the water issue. I did the report.
No.
is there a motion for the end of the city
I make a
council?
motion, we adjourn.
Motion to it.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
He motioned, I seconded.